While I was out on the road, I caught sight of my own child soliciting funds on the sidewalk, cradling my infant granddaughter. With a look of pure dread in her eyes, she quietly mouthed to me, "Father, you must leave. People are observing us." At that moment, I grasped that her spouse and mother-in-law had masterminded this entire nightmare. I simply told her, "Do not fret. I will deal with them." At the time, I was still unaware of how extensive their scheme truly was. Their actions went beyond mere theft. They had cornered her, pursued her, and pushed her to the edge of her sanity, and I intended to hold them fully accountable for everything. Reaching the age of 66 teaches you that staying quiet is a method of staying safe, and that was all I wanted. On that afternoon in June, I was returning from Sunrise Hospital with the physician's guidance still fresh in my thoughts. "Thomas, your tension rises whenever you are upset, so you must stay calm." I shut off the cooling system even though it was 105 degrees outside. At times, physical strain helps clear the mind better than being at ease ever could. Charleston Boulevard lay before me, with the desert heat creating visible distortions in the air. Movement was slow at the Rainbow Crossing. I pulled to a halt at the signal, resting my hands on the steering wheel while my thoughts wandered. That was when I noticed her, a gaunt woman in tattered clothing walking between the vehicles. Her attire was filthy and ripped, and she stood barefoot on the pavement, which was hot enough to see her meat. A small infant with full cheeks and a drooping head was secured to her front. She moved between the cars, urgently counting small change in her hand, not with the casual air of a typical person, but with the desperation of someone whose survival depended on every cent. I ought not have turned away, as Las Vegas is full of people seeking assistance at lights. However, curiosity forced me to look again. When she stooped to retrieve a fallen coin, I finally recognized her face. My heart constricted. It was my child, Jessica. Her name burst from my lungs. I flung my door open, and she looked up with wide eyes filled with dread rather than comfort. "Father, no, you must not be here. Go away, please." She retreated as if I were a threat. I told her to enter the vehicle immediately, trying to remain calm. She argued that people were watching, but I didn't care. I opened the side door and told her to get in. She remained still, holding the child tighter as the baby made a heartbreaking sound. I softened my tone and pleaded for her to let me assist her. Her composure broke, and tears ran through the dirt on her face. After looking around in a panic, she hurried into the car with the infant. The child's limbs were motionless from the intense heat. Jessica shut the door and ducked down, attempting to hide. The light changed, and I ignored the honking cars as I drove away. We were silent for blocks as she sobbed quietly, rocking her daughter and muttering things I couldn't distinguish. I had many inquiries, but one specific thought was more pressing than the rest, a question that felt cold and sharp. I looked at this person who seemed like a mere shadow of the daughter I had raised and supported. I asked her where the residence and vehicle I had purchased for were located. She shut her eyes, her body shaking, and eventually provided a response that was chilling. I drove aimlessly to put distance between us and that corner. Jessica remained curled over with Sophie. The child had become very quiet. I asked her for the full story. In a soft voice, she explained that the house, the car, and all $400,000 in her bank account were gone. My jaw tightened as she mentioned Kyle, Patricia, and Garrett. She cleaned her face with a dirty hand and explained that shortly after Sophie's birth, Kyle presented her with an engraved bracelet. She admitted she thought he was a wonderful husband. Then, claiming he was setting up a policy to secure the baby's future, he had her sign documents. She was exhausted from lack of sleep and signed without checking the details. It turned out she had signed over power of attorney, giving him total control of her assets. I felt a chill in my chest. She explained that for the last 2 weeks, Garrett or Patricia would drive her to various spots and force her to solicit money with the baby, threatening that she wouldn't eat if she didn't earn at least $20. They monitored her closely, and at night they locked her in a room without her phone, threatening that she would never see Sophie again if she reached out to me. I had to stop the car because I was shaking too much. When I asked her why she hadn't sought help, she said they convinced her that the shock would cause me to have a heart attack given my health issues. She confessed that she was also too embarrassed to come to me because I had warned her about Kyle 2 years ago. I remember her bringing him home and me telling her I didn't trust him because he was too focused on money, which she dismissed as paranoia.
Even on her wedding day, I had suggested she could change her mind, but she was convinced she was happy. She wept, realizing I had been right all along. I turned to her and said that being in love wasn't a mistake and that I didn't care about the lost property or money. All that mattered was that she and Sophie were alive. I promised to resolve the situation. I drove towards Henry Walsh's place on Boulder Highway. It wasn't luxury, but Henry was a reliable friend. He saw their condition and gave me a room key without asking anything, providing water and towels before leaving. Jessica collapsed onto the bed with the baby, who finally relaxed in the air conditioning. I watched the lot from the window, planning our next moves. They were safe for the moment, but I knew Kyle wouldn't stop. I stayed awake all night in a chair by the door, watching every car that passed. In the morning, I went to a store to buy supplies like formula, diapers, and clean clothes. Jessica finally looked peaceful after a shower and some rest with the baby. I spent the time strategizing. Since Kyle had resources and no morals, hiding wasn't a long-term solution. I needed professional help, lawyers and investigators. On the third day, there was a knock on the door. I told Jessica to stay quiet. A man named Brett, claiming to represent Kyle, spoke through the door about a family misunderstanding. I refused to talk. Then he mentioned Kyle's legal rights as a father and suggested I was interfering with custody. I remained calm but furious, noting that Kyle had forced them out. Brett claimed Jessica had left on her own and expressed concern for the baby's welfare since Jessica was begging. I told him to leave and inform Kyle that they were safe, but that he would regret any further contact. Brett laughed and mocked my health, reminding me of Kyle's power. He threatened that they would find us again before leaving. Jessica was terrified, so I contacted Henry and we moved immediately. Within minutes, we used a rear exit. I realized we couldn't just keep running. I had to fight back with help. We moved to a more secure apartment in Henderson with camera surveillance and card access. I told Jessica to stay inside while I went to see Samuel Porter, a lawyer I had known for years. He was a direct man who immediately asked who needed to be dealt with. After hearing the story, he suggested we hire Kenneth Morris, a top financial investigator, to track the missing money. Kenneth mentioned the power of attorney signed under false pretenses, which Kenneth noted as fraud. Samuel planned to file for a protective order and build a case for coercion and embezzlement. Regarding Sophie, Samuel argued that Kyle was responsible for her homelessness, not Jessica. I mentioned a witness, a volunteer named Lauren Reed, who had seen Jessica on the street. Kenneth promised to find her. Samuel warned that we only had days because Kyle would use legal or social pressure. As I was leaving, I received an anonymous text saying Jessica's image was all over social media. Samuel noted that public opinion was being used as a weapon.
That night in Henderson, I saw a Facebook video of Jessica at the intersection, filmed from a car. The caption, posted by Kyle, claimed she was mentally unstable, had disappeared with their daughter, and refused help. It had thousands of views, and the comments were vicious, accusing her of being a bad mother or a drug addict. Patricia had even commented, claiming she tried to help, but Jessica pushed them away. Jessica saw the post and the comments, her breath quickening as she realized people were calling her a bad mother who used her child for money. The floor seemed to shift beneath me as I read the comments. I scrolled further down, finding that the words from strangers were incredibly harsh. One person questioned what sort of parent would use an infant for a financial ruse. Another individual commented that she appeared to be under the influence of narcotics and suggested contacting social services. A third person claimed they had seen her the previous day and labeled her a career panhandler, advising others not to offer her anything. Positioned prominently at the top, thanks to the site's sorting system, was a remark from Patricia Richardson. She claimed she had exerted every effort to assist Jessica, stating that this behavior had persisted since the baby's birth. She wrote that they had provided everything for her, yet she consistently rejected them. Now, she claimed, Jessica was endangering the child, and Patricia expressed hope that she would receive help. Over 200 individuals had indicated their support for Patricia's statement. Many people had responded with messages of compassion for Kyle and hostility toward Jessica. I heard a slight noise from the other side of the kitchen.
Jessica had noticed the expression on my face. She put down the baby's bottle and walked over, her fingers already trembling as she asked what was wrong. I hesitated to show her, but she grabbed the device from my grasp before I could prevent it. She viewed the footage without saying a word. Then she began reading the public remarks. Her breathing grew rapid and her eyes filled with tears. She whispered that they were labeling her an unfit mother. She noted that they believed she was exploiting Sophie for cash, and then her voice failed her. She collapsed into the seat next to me, covering her mouth with her hands to stifle a cry. She felt as though the entire world viewed her as a villain. I took the phone away and placed it face down on the table. I looked her in the eye and told her that people only knew the false story they were being told. I reminded her that we were going to reveal the actual truth. Despite my words, I knew that the damage to her name was already spreading quickly. That night, I spent hours on the phone with Samuel and Kenneth. Samuel explained that we needed to counter this narrative immediately. He suggested that we get Lauren Reed to speak out. Kenneth reported that he had made progress with the financial records. He found that the $400,000 had been transferred into an account held by a shell company. That company was registered under Garrett's name, but managed by Kyle. This was the evidence we needed to prove financial exploitation. However, the legal process was moving slowly, and Kyle's online campaign was moving at lightning speed. The following morning, I received a call from Henry at the motel. He told me that some men had returned, asking more questions and looking for my car. They were getting closer. I told Jessica we needed to be even more cautious. I went to meet Lauren Reed at a small cafe. She was a kind woman who remembered Jessica clearly. She told me she knew something was wrong from the first moment she saw her. Lauren explained that Jessica always looked like she was being watched. She had even seen a black SUV parked nearby every time Jessica was out. Lauren agreed to sign a statement for Samuel. She said she couldn't stand to see a mother and child treated that way. This was a major win for us, but it was only one piece of the puzzle. I thanked her and headed back to the apartment. When I arrived, I found Jessica sitting on the floor with Sophie, looking through old photos on a tablet I had brought her. She showed me a picture of her wedding day. She looked so happy and full of life, a stark contrast to the woman who had been begging on the street. She asked me how she could have been so blind. I told her that people like Kyle are experts at manipulation. They find your weaknesses and use them against you. Later that day, Samuel called with news. He had successfully filed the temporary restraining order. Kyle and his family were legally barred from coming near Jessica or Sophie. This gave us some breathing room, but Samuel warned me that it would likely provoke Kyle. He was right. Within hours of being served, Kyle posted another video. This time he was crying, claiming that I was keeping his daughter from him. He called me a bitter old man who was destroying his family. The online hate towards us intensified. People were now sharing our address from the court filings. I knew we weren't safe in the apartment anymore. I called Samuel and told him we had to move again. He suggested a secure location he used for high-profile witnesses. It was a secluded house outside of the city. We packed our few belongings and left in the middle of the night. As I drove, I looked at Jessica and Sophie sleeping in the back seat. I felt a deep sense of responsibility to protect them, no matter what the cost. I knew that Kyle wouldn't stop until he had control again, or until we completely exposed him. We reached the new house just as the sun was beginning to rise over the desert. It was a quiet place, surrounded by high fences and desert scrub. Jessica felt safer here, but she was still deeply affected by the online comments. I told her to stay off social media, but it was hard for her to ignore the lies. Kenneth called later that morning with even better news. He had found a paper trail linking the home's sale directly to Kyle's personal gambling debts. It turns out he hadn't just stolen the money, he had lost a large portion of it in local casinos. This gave us a clear motive for why he was forcing Jessica to beg. He needed cash quickly to cover his losses. Samuel was thrilled. This transformed the case from a simple marital dispute into a serious criminal matter. He began preparing the paperwork to file formal charges of fraud and theft. However, we still needed to deal with the public narrative. Samuel contacted a local news reporter he trusted. He wanted to give them an exclusive story about what was really happening. Jessica was hesitant at first, but she realized it was the only way to clear her name. We scheduled the interview the following day. The reporter, a woman named Sarah Jenkins, arrived at the house with a small camera crew. She was professional and empathetic. Jessica told her everything: the forged papers, the threats, the long hours in the sun with Sophie. She even showed the bruises on her arms from when Garrett had forced her into the car. It was a powerful and heartbreaking interview. The news story had an immediate and powerful impact. By the following afternoon, the video of Jessica telling her story had gone viral, reaching even more people than Kyle's original post. The tide of public opinion began to turn as people realized they had been misled. Kenneth worked tirelessly, following the money through a maze of accounts. He discovered that the funds had been moved through a series of offshore accounts before being used to pay off Kyle's gambling debts and a luxury apartment for Patricia. Armed with this evidence, Samuel moved forward with the legal proceedings. A judge, after seeing the financial records and hearing Jessica's testimony, issued a permanent restraining order and granted Jessica full temporary custody of Sophie. The judge also ordered a freeze on all Kyle and Patricia's assets pending a full investigation into the fraud. It was a massive victory, but the battle wasn't over yet. Kyle and his family tried to flee the city, but they were stopped at the airport. Kyle, Patricia, and Garrett were all taken into custody and charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and child endangerment. As they were led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't felt in months. Jessica was finally safe, and she would get her life back. We spent the next few weeks working with Samuel and Kenneth to recover as much of the stolen money as possible. The house and car were eventually returned to Jessica, and a significant portion of the savings was recovered from the frozen accounts. Jessica began the long process of healing and rebuilding her life. She started seeing a counselor to deal with the trauma of what she had been through. Sophie grew healthier and happier every day, finally free from the neglect she had suffered. I stood by Jessica every step of the way, helping her navigate the legal system and providing emotional support. Our relationship grew stronger than ever as we worked together to overcome the challenges. I realized that even though I was 66 and had health issues, I still had a lot of fight left in me when it came to protecting my family. The community also rallied around Jessica, offering support and encouragement. People who had previously judged her reached out to apologize and offer help. Jessica even started a small support group for other women who had experienced financial abuse. She wanted to use her experience to help others who might be in similar situations. As the months passed, the memory of those dark days began to fade, replaced by new, happier memories. Jessica and Sophie were thriving, and I was grateful every day for that red light where I first saw her. It was a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always hope if you are willing to fight for it.
Looking back, I am proud of the way we handled the situation. We didn't let Kyle's lies and manipulation break us. We stood our ground and fought for the truth, and in the end, justice prevailed. My health even improved as the stress of the situation was replaced by a sense of purpose and accomplishment. I now spend my days enjoying time with Jessica and Sophie, watching my granddaughter grow and learn. We often go for walks in the park or visit the local library. Life is peaceful and good, exactly the way I wanted it to be. I know that there may be challenges ahead, but I also know that we have the strength and resilience to face them together. This experience taught me that silence isn't always survival. Sometimes you have to speak up and fight for what is right, even when it's difficult and scary. It also taught me the importance of family
and the power of love to overcome even the most difficult obstacles. I'm thankful for the help of Samuel, Kenneth, and Henry, who stood by us and provided the expertise we needed. I'm also thankful for the kindness of strangers like Lauren and Sarah, who chose to believe in us and help tell our story. Most of all, I am thankful for Jessica's courage and strength, which inspired me to keep fighting even when I was tired. Every time I look at Sophie's smiling face, I'm reminded that she was worth every bit of the struggle. She will grow up knowing that she is loved and protected, and that she has a family who will always be there for her. That is the greatest reward of all. Stories from grandfathers are more than just tales of the past. They are about the conflicts we engage in when everyone else has abandoned the cause. They are about standing as a barrier between malice and the people we hold dear, even when we are exhausted and fearful. If you are reading this and know someone who might be suffering, a daughter, a sibling, or a friend, do not wait. Do not assume they will reach out for assistance. Often, those who are hurting the most feel too much shame to ask for help. This true account has taught me that intervention can change everything. I hope this story moved you and showed you the power of standing up for your family. If you want to hear more deep and meaningful life stories like this one, please make sure to subscribe to ZERIX Truth. Your support helps us bring more of these incredible journeys to light. Thank you for being a part of our community, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.